When that happens, I think everything changes on this level. And if the things that we are told are true about the shortages at the industrial level, at the COMEX level, at the LBMA level, well, then it's a very, very quick process of everything disappearing and premiums going to the moon. Talk about treasuries, I wouldn't buy a treasury of greater than 6 months to save my life in terms of duration. The U.S. government has printed $500 billion in the month of October. It took us almost 200 years to print the first $500 billion. We did it in the span of 4 weeks. The speed at which the debt is accelerating and the ramifications that will ultimately have, in particular with the topic of du jour for me being the BRICS nations and how they are methodically de-dollarizing, there will come a moment when dollars and treasuries are forsaken, and you see this religious moment for most of the people in the country who realize that in that moment, everything that makes us feel wealthy, stocks, bonds, real estate, are all inversely correlated to a spike in interest rates. Well, if the world dumps dollars, like what's going on in the Middle East, people say maybe an oil embargo. How about the fact that maybe OPEC says, hey, we're done taking dollars for oil. We don't align with you ideologically. The fact that you're going green, you signed an executive order. Biden did so as one of the first things in office. And look, Saudi Arabia, well, we know you've been protecting us for the last 50 years, and we appreciate that. That's why we denominated oil in dollars all these years. But we've signed up with the BRICS, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest financial and military organization on the planet. We've joined the BRICS New Development Bank. We've told folks in Davos we're going to take other currencies for oil. We're already doing that with China and other countries. Thanks for the memories, but we're going to take other currencies for oil. And bang, just like that, every country on the planet dumps dollars. And now you have a villain to point to, is those bastards, Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC. How could they do it to us? That's when the dollar collapses. That's when interest rates spike to the moon to compensate for that inflation. And that's when you see that Klaus Schwab reset moment. That's when people run to buy gold and silver, because where else do you put your money right now other than super short-term treasuries where you can sleep well at night? And I think that's the realization that a lot of us in this community have already made, but most people wouldn't know a gold and silver coin if it fell on their foot until there's an event that wakes them up. And that event, perhaps that reset, well, that's blamed then on Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC, not on the Federal Reserve for their brain-dead monetary policy or the government for their brain-dead fiscal policy. And that's when people scurry to get the last few ounces that haven't been sold. That's how fast it changes. I see something like that happening. How else do you get people to take a CBDC, which again was written into law? BIS said everyone has to have one. And the number 2 economic advisor to the U.S. government, that's her baby. She worked with MIT in development of the central bank digital currency. Lael Brainerd, she worked on, she ran point for FedNow. She is a modern monetary theorist. She wants a culling of the banks. This is exactly what she hopes happens. And you see one bank fail that is bailed in. And the realization, most people listening to this show probably don't even know what a bail-in is. Research the Dodd-Frank Act, and you will understand what it is. When that happens, I think everything changes on this level. And if the things that we are told are true about the shortages at the industrial level, at the COMEX level, at the LBMA level, well, then it's a very, very quick process of everything disappearing and premiums going to the moon. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know. But in my mind's eye, I see that's exactly how I think it will happen. And until then, it's a hell of a subsidy. You're getting stuff cheap, and as cheap as I've seen it in 4 years. So if you believe even 5% of what I'm saying, one last point, when you talk about the U.S. weaponizing the dollar and telling Saudi Arabia we're going green, by weaponizing the dollar, half of the world is now afraid of the U.S. and is coalescing with these BRICS countries. 27 more countries have signed up formally for the BRICS. 22 have informally expressed interest on top of the 11 right now. And, this is a situation where you can't make it up. If you wanted to lose the world reserve status, you weaponize the dollar and you tell Saudi Arabia, the linchpin of the hegemony, hey, we're going green. Well, the number 1 economic advisor to the U.S. government is Jared Bernstein. He wants to lose the world reserve status. He publicly says this. He's written reports called Dethrone King Dollar. He commented on Trump when he slapped tariffs on China, said, great, hopefully we lose the reserve status. That was picked up in the Washington Post. His article, Dethrone King Dollar, in the New York Times, he advocates for losing the reserve status. Again, here's your villain, Xi Jinping, Putin, and OPEC. How could they do this to us? They dumped the dollar. They're no longer taking it for oil. And when that happens and the dollar collapses and it hits our fragile, fractured, way over leveraged, undercapitalized banking system, poof, there's your great reset. But have no fear, because Lael Brainerd is here with their CBDC. Sign on the dotted line, we make you whole. Now, this is my thought process. And somewhere along the lines in this, there will be an awakening, a mainstream awakening to, my God, I got to get some gold and silver in my hand. And that's how fast it changes. It's like there's no middle ground. It's either panic or complete and total silence. And somewhere in between is when we see, I think, things really, really change in this industry. But I will say it again, and I swear to God in my heart, I believe until then, it represents a generational subsidy where this is your one chance to add silver to your portfolio at ridiculously low prices, where everything that you and I look at would tell you that, hey, it's undervalued and should be a whole hell of a lot higher.
You look at things that are going on. I talked about the doom loop in the commercial real estate market in a video recently. Manipulation, I've talked about that. Now, you specifically talk about suppression, and I'm more open to it. I was pushed back against that for a long time in my analysis of silver. It's hard to believe that any financial institution would have a motive to do that, to keep the price of silver down, other than for personal gain, like what we saw with J.P. Morgan, with the precious metal traders who manipulated the price down and up for their own personal gain. But I do think there's two suppressive forces that come into play on the precious metals, and probably for any commodity out there for that matter, and that is the Federal Reserve. They are master manipulators. That's what they want to do. They try to do it anyway. They're trying to manipulate the dollar right now and the economy in general. They want to try to squash economic growth and employment. They want to get economic activity to slow down. There's that. And then you also have the derivatives. The amount of derivatives out there just in general is a very suppressive force. I always tell people that things like SLV, PSLV, that is the one that is backed 1-to-1. Apparently it's Sprott's PSLV, but ETFs in general, it's exposure to silver's price, not actual silver itself. And people have gone through the motions of actually trying to cash out, so to speak. It's very difficult to do, but somebody had done that and bought a couple 1,000-ounce bars, but nonetheless, it's not easy to do. And why would you do it? It's there to be exposed. It's a way to be able to put money into something that is easy to cash out with very low premiums. But I believe in the physical. Even though you pay a little higher premium for it, you have it on hand. You have single party risk as opposed to counterparty risk, which is much more manageable. The timing for all this stuff, I think it's one of those things. I could see what you're saying. You eloquently described what is going on and what could happen down the road. So many times I've seen, since I've been in this space, so many people say, well, hey, we only have till this long, get silver now before it goes to the moon, that type of thing. And then when it doesn't, people get jaded. And then people fall out and say, well, screw silver, I'm done. I'm to the point now where I'm now having to combat people who say silver is not a hedge against inflation. And I have to show them, hey, look at a chart over the past 100 years, even look at it over the last 10 years, draw a line, check it out for inflation-adjusted prices. Silver indeed does protect against inflation as long as you practice dollar cost averaging, or even better, I have a new term, enhanced dollar cost averaging. I've talked about on the channel. So I think keeping expectations real on silver is the best service that we can provide as commentators anyway. But again, there's a lot of concerning things that are happening, and some of which you've talked about here. A lot to unpack with what you've said there. Who knows when or how that'll come into play.
Yeah, and I've always said silver is wealth. You don't buy it to get wealthy. Sure, if you own enough of it, maybe you'll be wealthy, but you don't buy it to get wealthy. You look at it as an asset that has outlived everything the world's thrown at it for 5,000 years and is still considered to be wealth. And say obviously the same thing is true on gold. And right now, the United States, in terms of silver and its industrial applications, its reliance on imported silver is at 79% import reliant. And so, you're talking about the need for all of these industrial applications where you need silver, and we seem to be importing most of it. This is a deal where, if the price were allowed to be set free, certainly when you talk about the military industrial complex and all the weaponry that they're building, getting silver would be a very big problem. Making their bombs and their missiles and their high-tech weaponry and their aerospace and all of these things that you need becomes a very difficult thing. Like you said, why would the banks do this? I thought the same thing forever too. And reading the Pickaxe article opened my eyes. Well, there might be the reason. How is it that J.P. Morgan can pay a $920 million fine, the largest fine ever levied on a commodity company or a commodity complex trade, or just the largest fine the Justice Department ever gave out to anything related to commodities, where they're still allowed to run the world's largest silver trust, where they paid a $920 million fine, and that same year their metals desk made $1 billion. They walk away $80 million up. How is it that you can find that level of corruption and they still say, yeah, sure, go ahead, you can run the world's largest silver trust? It's almost as if, and I don't care about these very short jail sentences that Michael Nowak, their head trader, and a couple other guys have received. They were brought up on RICO charges, and the RICO charges were dismissed in favor of spoofing, which is a nothing. But the bottom line is that, ask yourself that question. Why would a bank like Bank of America be short 1 billion ounces, according to Ted Butler? Why would J.P. Morgan have been short all of those years, paying that fine, and at the same time, according to Ted Butler, amassing over 1.5 billion ounces of physical silver and 45 million ounces of gold? And so there's something behind it. I mean, is J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Bank of America, are they branches of the U.S. government or the Federal Reserve or the U.S. military? I don't know. But I will simply say to you that, to me, that there is a whole lot more demand for silver than the price would lend itself for someone to believe. And I don't think that's going to change until it does. And when it does, it will break in a manner that I think most people will be shocked by. So I don't tell you to do this to become wealthy. I truly don't. I've been buying it every 2 weeks for 34 years. That was the promise I made my father when I started Miles Franklin as a 19-year-old kid. I'll buy something every 2 weeks. I've honored that promise to him, even though I own the company, have for 2 decades. For 34 years, I've bought something regardless, whether it be 1 ounce of silver or an ounce of gold or whatever I buy something and have that cost averaging has been the greatest gift that my father ever gave me, ever. Taught me how to save and let the laws of compounding work for me instead of against me. And, all I can simply say to you is that I look at silver and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me that an asset that is so needed, so demanded, so accumulated is being held down with such effort to hold it down and to blur the real numbers. So, yeah, I think it's more along the lines of why are they holding it down than debating whether or not it's for profit. Are the banks just doing it to make money and pickpocket the managed money hedge funds? Maybe that's a bonus to it. But it certainly doesn't make sense to me why in this environment anyone would be short gold or silver, let alone 1 billion ounces, that Ted Butler and Vic Swear surmise Bank of America is short that amount in the OTC market right now. So I guess only time will tell. But again, if you're buying this as wealth and you see the biggest money in the world is moving away from the dollar and accumulating hard assets, then yeah, I think in the end it plays out. If you use that as your impetus for accumulating it, not to get wealthy quickly, that's what makes people upset. Geez, it didn't take off yet. Yeah, I get it. It is frustrating. It is counterintuitive, but yet the biggest money in the world still keeps accumulating it regardless of price. That, to me, tells you the last chapter.